So I suppose we should probably start wrapping up soon, but a very interesting question for me, and I don't know if anyone else will be really interested. What form of government are we talking here? Because we see very similar forms, in all state governments in in Australia. We're proposing something a little bit different, so we don't end up with a big government overlord again.
Yeah. No, that's a very good question, Tim. Because what we cannot do, or certainly we will not recreate the same problem. Now, the problem that we have in all of Australia is that our electorates, we have representative governance. Our politicians are elected from different electorates, and those electorates are based on equal population. I think in Victoria it's within 10% of the average. Every electorate has to be the same within 10% of the average. So there's 88 electorates, the entire voting population divided by 88, that defines the average of the population in each electorate, and then there's a 10% leeway either side. But the problem, now that might sound okay, but what has happened in Victoria and New South Wales and South Australia is that because most of the population growth is in the urban areas, and the number of electorates is limited to 88, the urban electorates get smaller in area, and the electorates around the fringe of that urban area get smaller as the population increases in that area. But because the population of each electorate increases, the only way to get the electorates in the country areas to keep up with that population growth is to make those country electorates bigger. And we've seen
geographically larger.
Yeah, geographically bigger, yeah. And we've seen, for example, the electorate of Mallee, the federal electorate of Mallee, and every time there's a redistribution in New South Wales or Victoria, the country electorates get bigger in area to capture the more people, and the electorates in the fringe areas, the areas around the cities get smaller. So we have to make sure we don't recreate that same problem where, for example, if we form a Riverina state, and just for example, Albury-Wodonga is part of that Riverina state, and then Albury-Wodonga turns into the Melbourne of the Riverina, or the Sydney of the Riverina, and we end up with just another huge urban population dominating the rest of the state. So we're proposing that we have a representative at Parliament, of course, but electorates based on population but limited by area. We will make sure we won't have this situation where electorates can continue to get bigger with no limit to how big they can get.
Okay.
So we're advocating that no electorates, they're based on a member of Parliament for every 10,000 voters, but no bigger than 10% of the area of the state. So one electorate cannot get bigger.
So it can sort of got a boundary of its
there's
own.
There's a limit on how
maximum,
big.
absolutely,
A limit on how big it can get. So it can only get no bigger than 10% of the area of the state. And you'll find immediately, I know Mallee is a federal electorate, but just for example, Mallee would immediately,
I think we lost a light.
Mallee would immediately become smaller again. So that's at one end of the scale. At the other end of the scale, in any 10% of the area of the state, there's no more than 10 electorates and no more than 10 politicians. So we want to make sure that even if a more populated area develops, it doesn't develop into a situation where we have at the moment, where over 3/4 of the population, politicians, come from about 2 or 3% of the area of the state. So we're advocating that, and that will immediately stop the problem that we've got now. Now, some people might say, gee, that's not democratic, you can't do that. But in actual fact, you can. And there's a precedent in Australian politics for area limits on electorates. It's not an exact precedent, but the Australian Senate consists of 12 senators from each state. Each state has 12 senators, regardless of population. So Tasmania, I think Tasmania's got, I think it's 1.5 million voters, or roundabouts, I'm not quite sure of the number, but there's 12 senators. Victoria, with I think 4.5 million voters, 12 senators. So there's already precedent for a representation not based entirely on exact population figures.
So just on the senators, real quick, that would our new state would likely then also have 12 senators. So that would also give us some federal balancing, I suppose.
Yeah.
It's not necessary.
No, not quite, Tim, because when Australia was federated, Section 120 is the relevant section there. Section 120 gives the federal government the authority to admit new states, but also to decide any terms or conditions that they think should be on that state.
Okay, yeah.
Which, and specifically in Section 120, they specifically mention representation in the Senate. So, but I don't know.
We'd have to negotiate very hard.
Yeah, I don't have a problem with that. Like, for example, a Riverina state federally would probably get, say, for example, instead of 12 senators, 2.
Yeah.
Like the Northern Territory, for example, has, I think, 2 senators.
Yeah.
We would start out with probably 2 senators as well.
Okay.
So, but of course, once we reach the population of Tasmania, which we would, very quickly, I would demand 12 senators.
Yes.
Once we reach that.
Yeah. Yeah, I think, so yeah, and that makes sense, and we're probably not getting that representation really at the moment anyway, at a federal level.
Oh, we're not?
Yeah.
No,
So it's still an improvement.
Oh, it's a huge improvement.
Yes.
Yeah, like, and just for example on that, like say for example, an Albury-Wodonga was in a Riverina state. Now, at the moment, and I'll just refer to New South Wales, but Albury has 1.2% of the representation in the New South Wales Parliament, because New South Wales has 93 members of Parliament, 93 electorates. Albury is 1 electorate, and that's 1.2% of the representation in the New South Wales Parliament.
Yeah.
Now, under a Riverina state, the proposed Riverina state with the area limits on electorates. Now, even though there's limits on the area of say, Albury would automatically achieve 30% of the representation in that new state.
Yeah.
And I'm excluding Victoria at this stage because I've just only calculated this on New South Wales.
Yeah.
So it would achieve 30% of the representation in that parliament, but it will not get any more.
Okay.
And when I say Albury, and I haven't done my maths very well there, it's Albury and Wagga, sorry. So you're talking about the most populated area of the state, of that proposed state, excluding Victoria at this stage. So it has 1.2 for Albury and 1.2 for Wagga. So 2.4% of the representation of the state. It would automatically go to 30% of the representation, but no more.
Yeah. Okay.
It will not develop into 75% or anywhere near 75% of the representation of that state. So the political representation of the state will be much more evenly dispersed throughout that state.
Yes.
And keep the political power more evenly dispersed throughout that state.
Okay.
We're also advocating, Tim, a few things, because we can't just, I don't think we can say we need another state and then have and not propose any model for that state. Now, we're advocating a few other things, and I think these will be very popular, that the people in the state elect the Premier. At the moment, of course, the Parliament elects the Premier. It might appear that the people elect the Premier.
So you sort of vote for the party elects the Premier.
And the parliamentarians elect the Premier, and then if the polling turns around and he's no good, well, they just turf him out and then put in a new Premier. But personally, I don't like that, and I don't think many people do, because we elect members of Parliament under the assumption or the understanding that he or she will be the Premier, and then all of a sudden they turf him out and change it. No, that doesn't happen. We're advocating that we actually elect the Premier as well. Okay. So, and there's a little bit of detail to that, which I won't go into. It's a little bit complicated, a bit more complicated than the time that we're at. Yeah. But the other thing is term limits on politicians, Tim. We're actually advocating that politicians can only be members of Parliament for a maximum of 8 years.
Yeah, okay. So 2 terms? 2
terms, for example. And then after that, thank you very much for your service, but you must stand aside and allow another candidate to be elected. Yeah. And the reason for that is there's a few reasons for that, but I think politicians, once they've been in there for 8 years, they've either achieved what they want to achieve or they've failed. Yeah. And whether they've achieved it or failed, they've basically done what they're going to do. Yeah. And we would be better served if they stand aside and we have another member of Parliament is elected.